Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and I trust you've enjoyed your 2023 pre-season with us here at the Coaches Panel. So much has happened over these past few weeks and months, but now we're in the final few days and hours ahead of round one. Already, some cash cows have been confirmed, some players have been ruled out, and others we will find out more about over the coming days. If you've been following the Coaches Panel, whether it be for just a matter of days and weeks or for a number of years, every single year here at the Coaches Panel, we do something special for our paid followers, our Patreons. What we provide to them is a cash cow guide. It is a guide that this year is over 80 pages long of analysis of every single player that we believe is relevant and worth having a conversation about, that could be someone that we see in our sides or consider in our sides, both to start or as an option throughout the 2023 season. Accompanying that guide is a podcast where we talk you through who are the best prospects, what is their scoring potential, what is their likelihood, and what are the strategies that we should be looking at alongside these cash cows. Now, generally, this is only ever available to our Patreons, people that chip in a couple of bucks a month at the basement tier. They get access to the guide and the podcast, as well as a bunch of other content rewards. And that is still the case in 2023. It's going to be opened up in 2023 also for our Spotify podcast subscribers. And we'll talk about them as the podcast unfolds. But what we wanted to do as a special treat for all followers of the Coaches Panel is just give you a 4-minute sample of what you can expect to hear on this podcast, to give you an idea of some of the analysis, the conversations, the strategies, everything that we're extrapolating off the back of this, to give you not just a nice little entree, but an encouragement. You know what? You're actually missing out some really great content. And so we'll play that for you in a moment. But if you've loved what you've got from the Coaches Panel in 2023, just for the bonus content alone, let alone for what you've already got out of the Coaches Panel, we'd greatly appreciate if you would jump in, even at that basement tier level of just a couple of bucks a month, let alone right up to the premium tier. It so helps us do everything we do. So if you've got anything good, helpful, challenging from the Coaches Panel this pre-season, then I really would encourage you to jump in. All the details are at coachespanel.tv, as well as in the link of this podcast, to jump in at that basement level. There is another way you can keep getting exclusive content and podcasts from us, but I'll tell you at the end of this episode as well. So what are you missing if you're not getting this Cash Cow Guide podcast and you're not getting the 80 plus pages of analysis? Well, let me give you a little sample. Cam Mackenzie really did show the fantasy community just how much talent this kid has.
So, MJ, this is how fickle we are as a DT community, okay? Mackenzie was highly owned before that intra-club or practice game or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. He then was managed to ease him into round one, get his loads perfect and everything else. And everyone saw that as a red flag and went, oh, no, the kid's had a massive pre-season. Everyone's talking as he's the best on track for the pre-season. Let's jump off him. And they saw the opportunity to free him up to rookie basement priced mid that they thought was a 50-50 shot that could get named round one, when Mackenzie was more than that. Absolutely. Don't overthink this one. And then he played in the practice game and he was as good as everyone had been saying. He franked every single thing we heard out of Hawthorn over the pre-season. And everyone went, oh, no, we better go get him back in. So he went one of the most traded out to one of the most traded in
Unbelievable, isn't it?
In a 2-day period where the practice game was in between.
We did the same with a Jackson McRae, albeit a very different type of player. Is the community just ebbs and flows way too much in groupthink and sheep mentality. I think he's a fieldable guy for us yet again this year. But where he is really fascinating to me.
M7 or M8?
That's my question.
Positions.
Because tell me why.
M7, means you've got confidence around what Phillips' role is for North Melbourne.
Yes.
Because we're going to talk about Phillips, but let's just knock him off now. He's the one, he's probably the mid outside, not named Ashcroft, with the best job security. Okay,
I agree with that.
So Phillips will play games and will play a lot of games.
Agreed.
The real question mark, though, is
Where?
What is his role? Is he inside? Is he outside? He, as a junior, he was pick 3 or 4 in the draft because he was an inside mid.
He's the best mid in the draft in most people's eyes. Yeah.
His outside game needs work. Now, we saw that in his first season of football, it needs work because he was stuck on the wing because they had the Andersons and Cunningtons and Simpkins. Guess what, MJ? Same problem. We've got the Simpkins, we've got the LDUs, we've got the Cunningtons, we've got the Powells.
Yeah.
They picked up a guy called George Wardlaw,
inside
who was a
beast.
contested beast.
Absolute
and he can only
beast.
play it. This guy is going to have a question mark around his role, which means his fluctuation of scoring is going to be either very good or very bad. It could go from 30 points one week, 70 points the next week.
Yeah.
Now, that's the risk you're going to have. If you want him there at M8, and that's a very, very valid scenario.
Absolutely it is.
You need to compare M8 to your F6 in these matchups because they're the two that are going to be interchangeable. Who do I play because of the big forwards? So who I'm going to play on field? And it might come down to matchup. But you've got a guy like Green, you've got a guy like Menzie, you've got a guy like Davey. If they've got a favourable matchup, they're likely, even Philippou, they're likely to push out a 50-60 quite comfortably in that F6 position. You know, so that's where the decision's going to be. And it's going to have to sit with the coach and the comfort levels. But again, you've got 2 rookies on field already in the mid. If you want 3, that means you're going to have to go bigger in the premiums and the forward to cover it off to be able to interchange it.
Yeah, it really does. And as you may have, if you've read through the guide yet, or perhaps just been following what's been happening with our cash cows this year, the midfield seems to be the line we have the least options in comparison to previous years where we've had this bounty. All right, that's enough. Not giving you any more than that. That's just a few minutes of what is like an hour plus podcast, I think it is, of Rids, myself, talking through the relevant cash cows, both those that we know, those that are coming, and those that we might get during the season. And so there's 2 ways you can get this. The first is you can become a Patreon. All the details are linked in this podcast description. You can join for as low, I think it is like $2 or $3 a month. You will get the podcast, you will get the accompanying guide, and you'll get access to a bunch of other hidden access to groups, special challenges, and additional content. And a ton of other stuff. I got to be honest with you. It's really crazy cheap. So if you've loved what you've heard in that little soundbite, or you just want to show your support to the coaches panel, encourage you to become a Patreon. There's another way you can listen to it, and that is for our Spotify listeners only. You can become a subscriber for just a handful of dollars a month. You actually get some tailored content that is normally only reserved for our premium tier of Patreon. I think it's $10 a month, but for just $5 a month, you do miss some of the articles. You won't get the guide of 80 pages. But if you just want the podcasts, this is for you. For about $5 a month, you get this podcast. You get access to our annual top 50 keeper ranks. You get access to our positions podcast as the year rolls around. You get access to our trade and kind of mid-season movements that happen. you get that podcast. Free agency podcast, you get that. And in season, you get a round review podcast from me that normally these episodes only ever get to our top tier of Patreon supporters. But Spotify subscribers, you can get them for $5 a month. Now, you don't get some of the other benefits. You don't get the hidden groups, the additional articles. You don't get some of the extra preferences and fun stuff that these Patreons get. But if you're like, man, I just want the podcast and nothing else, well, over on Spotify for a handful of bucks a month, you can get that too. Thank you for being part of the Coaches Panel in 2023. There's another podcast that's dropping in a matter of hours, if I'm being honest with you. Chances are it might already be there by the time you're listening to this, but it is our final episode of the preseason, talking through all the big dilemmas and discussions we've got to get to before lockout lands. Thank you again for listening right throughout this preseason. We so greatly appreciate you. Thank you for those of you that are going to make the decision today and become a Patreon or a Spotify subscriber. Your financial support helps the Coaches Panel to be able to give you the content you know and you love, and more that we'd love to give, but your financial support helps us to be able to do that. So thank you to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting, and we can't wait for you to hear more from the Coaches Panel as we hit into the 2023 season.